Edwin Crawford was standing in the middle of the desert when a girl with white hair suddenly dropped from the sky, landing straight into his arms. Totally lost and not getting what was going on, the girl wanted out of his grip fast. But Edwin wasn't letting her go. He'd barely managed to track down a wife, and what if she tried to run? Hearing that, the girl froze up even more and stared at him like he'd grown 3 heads. She'd been chillin' in a bus just seconds ago, then out of nowhere this sharp pain, and everything went blurry after that. Glancing around, she couldn't figure out how the heck this desert even showed up in front of her. First things first, she decided to ask the guy straight up, who the hell was he and where did she end up? Edwin smirked and introduced himself, claiming he owned the whole damn West. His name hit her like a flash, remembering the insane villain from some adult novel she'd read before, a maniac killer with a reputation. They compared him to a dragon, and he'd slaughter everyone in sight, obsessed with kidnapping white-haired people and torturing them. White hair was usually just for old folks, but the novel's main character, Lillian, had it from some cursed illness. Edwin had snatched her. He tormented her, but then suddenly fell head over heels, and the story ended with her dying in the prince's arms, the main hero who saved her. Meanwhile, the girl was freaking out. How the hell did she end up in the arms of this guy? At the same time, Edwin barked orders at his soldiers to finish off the last of their enemies. Glancing sideways, she spotted people tied up with blazing red eyes, all locked onto her. She instantly turned away in horror into Edwin's shoulder, who figured his bride had quite the soft heart. But there was nothing to be done, so he ordered Beryl to hand him the sword. Grabbing the massive 2-handed sword in one hand, the hero strode toward the enemies, holding the terrified, near-hysterical bride with his other arm. Swinging on his shoulder, she suddenly noticed she had white hair too. At that moment, Edwin made a sharp swing with his sword, and the girl watched blood spray in all directions. Noticing she was getting nauseous, the hero figured she had a weak stomach too. Well, the main business was done, so it was time to head home. Edwin mounted the horse with the bride in front of him, and she couldn't grasp where she'd messed up so badly. Just being thrust into a romance novel was shocking enough, but she also had white hair. After a while, they arrived at the Crawford dukedom and made their way to the massive castle of His Grace. At the entrance, a man in a suit greeted the lord calmly. The heroine instantly recognized him as the one Edwin trusted, Seth Million. In the novel, only he greeted and escorted the Duke. When Edwin's in a bad mood, he can kill someone, so they had a prior agreement. Seth studied the girl with a calm gaze, curious about who she was. The Duke smiled in return and happily announced that she was the long-awaited gift from the gods, his bride. Terrified by the butler's menacing gaze, the girl shivered and hid behind Edwin's back. Lifting her into his arms, the hero decided to clarify that the heroine had a soft heart and a sensitive stomach, so she needed to be handled with care. After a few minutes, they were alone in the parlor, and sitting in his lap, the girl pleaded for forgiveness. She hoped the Duke would show mercy and let her down, but he wasn't about to. Tracking her down had been no easy task. Hearing she wouldn't be making a run for it, he chuckled and poked her nose. The heroine let out a blood-curdling scream, and he was a bit crestfallen. Was he really that terrifying? She wanted to explain to him that it was just a shock, but then she suddenly heard the request to call him by his first name. At the same time, he finally wanted to know what was his bride's name. However, she had no memories of this body's past life, and she herself didn't know who she was. At the same time, she didn't want to reveal her real name from the real world. Edwin's whole demeanor radiated impatience, and after building up enough tension, she confessed she had no idea of her name, or why she'd fallen from the sky to him. Brushing his fingers against her chin and gazing into her eyes thoughtfully, the hero couldn't help but wonder, had the gods really sent him a test? However, her ruby-like eyes and snow-white hair clearly pointed to one truth: she was his bride. Of course, her amnesia confused him, but he decided it would only make things more fun. Now Edwin can fill her thoughts with nothing but himself, and that's exactly why she screamed again. After that, he decided to give her a name until her memory came back. He thought it over for a few minutes and settled on naming his bride Angelina. He hoped his angel, and God's gift, would love the name, which just made the heroine freeze up even more. If something ever got into Edwin's grasp, he never let go. The only way to escape his captivity was to die. According to the novel, his captives faced endless torture. Trapped in unbearable pain, they could only beg for a quick death. Angelina was terrified she'd end up the same, while the hero just couldn't get why his bride was stressing out so hard. Let's get one thing straight, he never called the kidnapped blondes his bride in the novel. So Angelina gathered her courage and decided to find out, why was she the exception? Turns out Edwin got an oracle saying his life would be cut short unless he married a girl who fell from the sky. In the Assyrian Empire, Dracula's prophecies are for nobles and royalty, but the novel only mentioned the prince receiving one. The Duke agonized over it for ages and eventually shrugged. Maybe the gods were just messing with him. So he decided to mess back and personally slaughtered every priest who'd delivered that oracle. Angelina's shaking in horror, while Edwin recalls how she literally crashed down from the sky right on cue with the prophecy. When she realized she was from the Jewel family, Angelina almost fainted from the shock. She screamed again, couldn't believe it, but the Duke knew only one race could have hair this pale. The second clue was her eyes, glittering like precious gems, refracting light in every shade. He thought it looked damn good, but the heroine was too shaken to care. Jewel Clan were humans with actual fairy blood hiding out in the Crowford Desert. Some oracle labeled them as empire killers, so the emperor started erasing their whole people. He never saw it coming, the curse that'd follow their deaths, or how monsters would erupt from the sequel's fallout. If the emperor himself greenlit a genocide, his secret bird army would drop Angelina the second they spotted her. Edwin froze when he saw her pale as a ghost. What the hell was scaring his soft-hearted fiancé? After her panic, his eyes narrowed cold and hot with rage. Who dared touch what was his? She had nothing to fear. All she had to do was stay glued to him. Telling herself he wasn't rattling her more than she already was, Angelina nodded stiffly. With all the terror in his precious bride's eyes, Edwin couldn't let her slip from his fingers. Then he snapped at Seth to grab the dagger and engagement papers. He'd have liked a full marriage vow better, but for now he figured less was more. Didn't want to blow her mind harder. The heroine clarified she had no damn idea why she fell from the sky or lost her memories, so yeah, she had reason to be scared. To cheer her up, Edwin made it clear what would happen to her every second. The words hit her like lightning, coursing through her body, because that's exactly what the problem was. A little later, the butler set everything up and asked if the master was really going through with this. The Duke knew his bride was nervous and wanted to show her he wouldn't let her out of his sight from now on. Grabbing the dagger, he made it clear this was only for him. He brought the blade to his finger, telling Angelina to shut her eyes if she couldn't handle it. She closed her eyes tight, thinking they should have warned her ahead of time. When she opened her eyes, Edwin's bloodied finger was right there, smiling as he held it to her lips. She ended up drinking his blood, and the hero tossed her a chocolate bar to nibble. She remembered how he and Lillian made her do this when they confessed their feelings. The Duke watched her like a hawk for a few seconds, waiting for something to happen. He was glad she was okay, and Angelina was confused. Like, what problem? Grabbing the knife again, Edwin grinned. This time, it was her turn. The heroine flung herself behind the couch in a panic, screaming, "You said the dagger was only for you!" The hero figured she better not run. After all, he'd handle his bride with care. He was dead set on making sure she'd be safe and happy. Personal. Angelina squeezed her eyes shut, and Edwin got to work. She let out a shrill scream of panic. But then it hit her. He'd only lightly pricked the tip of her finger and brought it to his mouth. A second later, her finger brushed his tongue, and she blushed furiously before yanking her hand away with a gasp. Wiping her finger on a cloth, Angelina decided to ask just why they'd gone and done that anyway. Turns out they'd just made a blood contract, and the name alone was enough to scare the girl. The Duke said the dagger was cursed with magic. Now their bodies and souls were bound together. They could track each other's location and feel it if one got hurt. Edwin was thrilled to finally protect his bride whenever he wanted, while she was already mourning her old life. Now they just had to sign the papers and call it a day. Angelina knew escaping was pointless, but suddenly realized she couldn't even read the contract. It was all in a language she didn't know. But the heavens must have handed her a lucky break, since she read the words on the page like it was nothing. With a defeated sigh, she signed the document and handed it back to her groom, who was over the moon. Then he swooped her off her feet to her new chambers, luxurious, warm, and way too fancy for her taste. The catch? They were now stuck in neighboring rooms, and she was convinced the Duke was going to stalk her every move. Meanwhile, Edwin apologized since he hadn't expected their meeting to be so sudden and hadn't prepared for it. Angeline figured there was everything she needed here, so there was no need to worry. The hero was confused by her words and decided if she needed anything, she just had to say so. At that moment, the head maid Sarah came over, wanting to personally make sure Lady Angeline was comfortable. Right after her, the maid Jenny entered, here to become the personal attendant of the future Duchess. She wanted to get down off the floor to greet the servants, but the Duke decided the bride could do it from his arms. After all, no one would dare criticize her, not even if she did it while reclining. Knowing there was no way around it, Angeline cheerfully greeted the maids, hoping they'd take care of her. Edwin thought she should study up on etiquette. After all, a duchess can't just chat with servants like that. She decided to argue. After all, she hadn't officially received the title yet, and never was a noble to begin with. The hero lost his temper at her words. How dare someone belittle his chosen one? Seeing the servants' faces go pale, Angeline quickly clarified that none of it had ever happened, and the Duke was always right by her side. Either way, he wanted her to stop overthinking and remember, she's now the fiancée of the West's master. Until then, she'd thought only his endless smile couldn't scare her, but now even that looked hollow. A few minutes later, she was alone in her room and, exhausted, collapsed onto the bed. The hero left, planning to ask her out to dinner later, and the girl felt a huge wave of relief. Suddenly, Jenny's voice rang out. She was here to draw the ladies' bath, and Angelina jumped a foot in the air. Being here for the first time, she wasn't used to being treated this way and reluctantly nodded along. So much had happened, she couldn't process it all. What the hell was she supposed to do now? Deciding to start by checking her face, she climbed off the bed and headed to the mirror. Staring into her reflection, crystal white hair, dazzling mother-of-pearl eyes, she realized she was definitely a Julie. Later, she remembered from the novel, Edwin was totally fixated on white hair because he was hunting for Julius. But the book never explained why, leaving her completely clueless. On one side, there was the psycho groom, and on the other, the bloodthirsty emperor. Who the hell knew how to survive this mess? Sure, Edwin wanted to save her life. He even made a blood pact with her, but that didn't mean things would be easy. Meanwhile, you can't negotiate with His Majesty, but the Duke was different. After all, she was his prophesied bride. Angelina still didn't know why he needed the Julius, but she stayed with him anyway, figuring it'd keep her alive longer. She planned to lay low and live long, keep her head down and avoid any unnecessary risks. A little later, she slipped into a steaming hot bath, supervised by her personal maid. The hot water relaxed her fast, and the heroine let out a long, ear-splitting yawn. Figuring she was wiped out, Jennifer asked first, then started massaging her hands, and Angelina melted into the pleasant sensations. Suddenly, the maid wondered what they'd do with the ring on her index finger. Staring at it in confusion, the heroine had no idea where it came from, or if it even belonged to the previous owner of this body. Suddenly, she spotted some kind of inscription inside and tried to make it out. To her surprise, the letters were indecipherable, and Jennifer didn't recognize the language either. The ring itself looked ominous, and that inscription only made it creepier. Maybe something bad happened to the previous owner of this body, and Angelina couldn't figure out why she'd even fallen from the sky? There wasn't enough to go on. Back in the bedroom, the heroine collapsed onto the bed, utterly drained. Wrapping herself up under the blanket, she decided to focus on surviving, for now. She passed out instantly, slept through the night, and woke at dawn to sunlight dancing on her face. She spotted Edwin sitting beside the bed. He hadn't expected his bride-to-be to be such a sleepyhead. She screamed in terror, and the hero assumed it was a joyous scream. He didn't see anything odd about a husband entering his wife's bedroom, though technically they weren't married yet. Angelina couldn't believe it. Would he really show up every morning now? When she heard the answer, she was completely thrown. Edwin suddenly turned serious and decided to find out if there was something she didn't like. The girl screamed in horror again, realizing her hair was a disaster, her face was dirty, and her breath probably reeked too. Laughing and patting her head, the Duke thought his bride was absolutely adorable. Picking her up, he marched off determinedly to their shared breakfast. Later, seated together at a table overflowing with food, he leaned in to ask what she wanted to eat. There was enough food for 10 people, and the heroine knew she couldn't possibly eat it all, but as it turned out, she only needed to pick what she liked. Even being across the table from the villain made her anxious. Forget about actually eating. After a few minutes, Edwin was baffled by how little his future Duchess had eaten. Smiling in response, she had no idea how she even managed to eat with him staring at her the whole time. Meanwhile, the Duke ordered Seth to pass along to the head chef that she'd liked the seafood, mushroom soup, and desserts. The heroine was stunned to realize he hadn't touched a thing and had just been staring at her plate the whole time. When she heard their meal was over, she got even more confused. He hadn't eaten anything. Edwin froze for a second, then burst into genuine laughter, finding the whole thing hilarious. But Angelina just didn't want to be the only one who had eaten. Deciding she shouldn't worry, he remembered his own breakfasts were always light, and resolved to boost his temple donations for sending him such a kind bride. After that, Jenny led the mistress to the wardrobe room to change clothes. The order came in hot, and she bought everything in a rush, so some stuff might not fit, but we'll adjust it later. The heroine expected to see a couple of outfits, but suddenly a whole store opened up in front of her. The maid was thrilled she nailed the size guess and only needed to tweak the sleeves a little. Then she settled the mistress into a chair and got to work styling her hair, then applying makeup. Angelina sat in a panic, clueless about what the future had in store for her. But she didn't have time to brood or deny what was happening. She was in the grip of a crazy killer. First priority, boost her survival odds. That meant stopping the royal family from killing Edwin. The main problem? In the original novel plot, it was the crown prince who offed him. He pulled it off with the Saphiro sword, forged from dragon scales and packed with divine power. Luckily, Angelina knew where the sword was. She had to grab it before the heir prince did. Otherwise, not only Duke Crowford would croak, but she herself as well. After primping up, the heroine went to see His Highness. He decided her outfit couldn't rival her beauty. When he mentioned buying new clothes, she hurried to clarify, the ones she had were more than enough. Edwin knew she was selfless, but she'd better just roll with it. He was dead set on making it a gift. He seated the bride at the table, and she spotted a few mysterious cases in front of her. Opening them one by one, he hoped this would remind her of who she truly is. The Javellis have inherited fairy blood, whose power lies in precious gems, so Angelina can use them. Upon hearing she had the talent to release power, she hoped she could shoot fire. The Duke wasn't sure, but it was probably healing. Sighing glumly, the heroine thought it was kind of boring, but still better than nothing. The problem was she didn't know how to release the gem's power, and Edwin didn't know either. The Duke, meanwhile, melted over her puffed-up lips and annoyed expression. He decided to make it her homework and promised to grant a wish as a reward. At first, Angelina's eyes lit up with hope, but when she heard breaking the engagement and running off weren't allowed, she instantly slumped. In the end, she couldn't awaken her powers. After a while, Edwin suddenly took her to the desert. Turns out the place they arrived at was once the mighty Javelli household. He wanted to see if her memories would return after she returned home. The land where the Javellis lived was called Ambrian, and the Duke knew so much about them because his family had lived there for generations. Glancing off thoughtfully, he recalled hearing a lot from his father as a kid. Angelina knew the novel didn't mention it, and everyone assumed the first Duke of Crawford's death was tied to the imperial family. He died in the demon riot His Majesty unleashed after jewelry was destroyed. The heroine doubted he'd just up and die like that, especially since they'd already reached Ambria by then. Now it looked like any old desert, but Edwin said it wasn't always like that. He reminded them they'd used gemstone magic. Most could only heal, but the hero's dad said Ambria once had lush forests and sparkling lakes. Angelina was surprised the first Duke had ever been here, but Edwin said every family head had to visit at least once. Plus, he was thrown that his bride was asking so many questions, but she played it cool, like she was just trying to piece her memories back together. Hauling her over to a gnarled, dead tree, the Duke clarified Ambria was shielded by a barrier. No one got in without permission. To outsiders, this place didn't exist. Period. The tree in front of them was jewelry's guardian. It kept the barrier standing. He set her down, shoved her toward the trunk. She hesitated, then laid her hand gently on the bark. Angelina realized the soul in this body belonged to a race they'd sworn to protect, one that had to fight just to stay alive. Thinking they'd remember her, she suddenly felt a strange pulse radiating from the tree. Her hand fused to the trunk in an instant. She couldn't tear it loose. Sharp pain lanced through her entire body, like every cell was ignited like a wildfire. Edwin froze in horror, pulling his bride close, completely baffled. He ordered her to pull her hand off the trunk immediately, but all he got was pained whimpers in response. Not understanding how this tree dared harm his chosen one, he suddenly heard soldiers screaming and the clash of battle. Crows ambushed their unit, and the hero quickly set the girl aside to deal with the enemies. At that moment she understood nothing and heard nothing, feeling her heart about to explode from the pain. Right then, one of the enemy soldiers started sneaking up on her from the side. Angelina caught sight of him at the last second, just as the sword's edge was aimed at her head. She screamed loudly, unconsciously calling out Edwin's name, squeezed her eyes shut in terror, and braced for death. But nothing happened. When she opened her eyes, the enemy's lifeless body had collapsed beside her. The Duke was furious at such audacity. How dare he even think of touching what was his? Leaning toward his heroine, he hoped she was okay and wanted to deal with the crows ASAP. Terrified of death, Angelina had forgotten everything else. Now the pain was coming back, and she struggled to stay conscious. Edwin decided to clarify that if she tried to die, he'd hunt her down in the afterlife and make her beg for death. Stunned by the crazy talk, she couldn't help but smile. It was weird how the Duke's hug calmed her instantly and made her feel totally safe. Telling herself she was losing her mind, the heroine slowly shut her eyes and blacked out. When she dropped from the sky, Edwin was totally stunned, but also damn glad. The only thing that bugged him was how the timing, location, and look were an exact match for the oracle's prophecy. There was only one way to check if she was a Jevil, and that was to make her drink his blood. If a regular person drank Crowford blood, their whole body would twist in pain, so the hero watched her closely. Only after the blood pact was sealed did he realize his bride had lost her memory. The precious stones did nothing. Sitting in his study, surrounded by servants, the Duke had no clue what to do next. Then Seth figured, why not take her to Ambria? Right after, a thought hit Edwin. He thought maybe facing trouble in a familiar spot would jog her memory, so he goaded the crows into an attack. They couldn't match his strength or his army, so he had no reason to panic. He prepped like crazy, thinking he could protect her. But everything went sideways. Beryl sprinted toward him in the middle of the battle, trying to get him to chill. He took the advice. The hero didn't want Angelina seeing him like this. When he turned back, his worst fear was confirmed. She was sprawled out on the sand in front of the tree. Sprinted over and lifted her up by the arms, he started calling her name and begging her to wake up. At least he knew she was alive because the blood oath was still active. After hearing from Burial they'd dealt with the ravens, Edwin hoped no one escaped. His bride was supposed to be a secret. Back at the castle, he handed her over to the doctor immediately, strictly forbidding him from spreading any info. After treatment, the hero stuck around with her all the time. Seth wondered if he even thought about resting. Sitting on the bed with his bride in his arms, Edwin decided he was resting just fine, even though he hadn't eaten a single bite. The ravens were taken care of, Angelina was safe, but the Duke's fury wasn't going anywhere. He vowed not to let the girl out of his hands, or he'd lose his damn mind. Mentally apologizing for his idiotic plan, he hoped she'd wake up soon. Meanwhile, a lone cloaked traveler approached Ambria's sacred tree and stared at it intently. He'd waited a long time, but now the time had finally come. Placing his palm on the tree trunk, he suddenly saw a bright light engulf him. Meanwhile, Raven Captain Kassan arrived at the Crown Prince's chambers with another report of failure. The heir hoped at least some soldiers survived, but the captain just looked down silently and said nothing. Sighing heavily, the Crown Prince remembered he'd personally picked Kassan for the Raven Commander role, so he hoped the captain wouldn't let him down again. Lowering his head and vowing to find her for sure, Kassan vanished in an instant from the heir's view. Thinking his dad would definitely complain again, the Crown Prince couldn't get why the old man even thought they needed to get rid of Jevely. You won't get a full resolution until Duke Crawford's dead. He's the top priority. The Jevely race got wiped out, so why's this guy still breathing when he was supposed to croak with his dad? Plus, Edwin inherited the family's powers, so the Emperor can't have total control as long as the Crawfords are around. The Assyrian Empire was all about strength, except the capital territories which the imperial family ran. Duke Peyton ruled the east, and the west was under Duke Crawford. Duke Shavini had the south, and the north was in Archduke Hazen's hands. Out of all of them, Duke Crawford's army was the strongest, keeping the western border secure. Even without counting Edwin's personal strength, his army was way more powerful than the Emperor's. The Crown Prince knew that if these guys stayed loyal to the imperial family, there was no better defense. No need to worry. But at the same time, the heir saw Assyrian as his own. No way he was sharing it with anyone. The next day, sitting across from the heroine, Edwin suddenly saw her eyes pop open. She screamed in terror like always. The hero was just glad she woke up before he lost his last nerve. Angelina was completely lost, and he found himself wondering if she really couldn't remember anything again. Hearing that maybe it had hurt too much yesterday, she suddenly started remembering how she'd blacked out from the pain. Her whole body shivered, and the hero immediately pulled his bride close, trying to calm her down. Crying her eyes out into his chest, she was absolutely certain she was going to die. A few seconds later, she decided to clarify if that guardian tree was actually dead. Turns out it was, and had been for a long time. But the heroine had thought it was alive, like it wouldn't let her go, and that searing pain had sounded like a heartbeat. Smiling, Edwin decided his bride was definitely something special. Even dead trees got greedy around her. He decided to look into it himself. That's when Angelina got curious. Who were those people who wanted her dead? According to him, they were the Crows, a red-eyed secret imperial organization that only the Crown Prince controlled. They'd been formed during the persecution of the Jeveli 15 years ago, operating under the prince's orders. Everything about them was shrouded in secrecy. The only thing for sure? They were still hunting for traces of the Jeveli. Shaking with fear, Angelina realized they definitely knew about her existence. Just thinking about them inevitably finding and grabbing her made her vision blur. Watching her slump, that was exactly why the Duke had refused to say anything. She had nothing to fear here. Those crows could never hurt her. The girl felt that weird feeling again, the one she just couldn't bring herself to accept. It was so annoying. Even when she couldn't move her arm, the pain was unbearable, and the enemy's sword was pointed right at her. All she could think about was Edwin. Clutching her eyes shut and lowering her head, she realized in horror that she'd have to spend all her time with that lunatic just to survive. Holding her in both arms, the Duke decided his bride had taken on too many burdens. Later, the heroine started thinking about how to unlock the power of those precious stones. She sighed heavily, knowing she had to do it as soon as possible, but so far, there was still no progress. Jenny noticed her lady had been sighing a lot lately and decided things couldn't go on like this. So she decided to take the future Duchess on a little walk in the garden. They arrived at a pavilion overlooking a field of blooming marigolds, so stunning it was hypnotic. Wanting to make her lady a nice drink, the maid asked if she had a favorite tea or dessert. While she was gone, Angelina wanted to pick some flowers, but the gardener suddenly brought her a whole basket. Coming back with a tray, Jenny was really confused by how many flowers there were. She decided to sort them out while her lady could enjoy her tea in the fresh air. She spread some whipped cream on it, took a bite, and felt pure bliss. The peaceful vibe shattered as the Duke's voice rang out, finally happy to have found his bride. Her cheerful face made him curious. He had to know what had her so damn happy while he was gone. She'd never looked so inspired when she was with him, and it was killing him. He spotted the tarts on her plate were lopsided and snapped. Who the hell thought it was okay to serve my bride this mess? Jenny froze, her face going white as she dared not look up. She quickly explained, "These tarts are supposed to look like that, honestly." She slathered one with cream and strawberry jam, handing it to him. "This is amazing," she said. As Edwin slowly bit into it from her hand, she locked eyes with him. She was sure it couldn't be that bad. Edwin burst out laughing, clutching his head. Angelina's heart dropped. Had the tarts been poisoned after all? He pinched her nose. "You're adorable," he said. Stunned, his gaze had her flustered. Spotting the basket of flowers nearby, he realized she liked them and declared he'd plant them all over the garden. Angelina didn't see the need. She liked all flowers. An awkward silence hung between them. She figured maybe he wanted a flower crown to lighten the mood. He handed her the basket with excitement. "Make me one. Now." His tone left no room for argument. She hadn't expected him to say yes, so she started crafting one after another, determined to make them perfect and avoid his wrath. After glancing through about a dozen of the jewelry items he'd gotten, the hero couldn't figure out which one she wanted to give him. When he heard they were all for him, he perked up and clarified he'd take any from his fiancée. Tossing one on his head, Edwin hoped it looked good on him. Angeline hadn't realized just how handsome his face was until now. Not that she was too scared to notice. Putting a veil on her head, the hero thought it looked great. In this warm, cozy atmosphere, it felt like yesterday's events were just a bad dream. The Duke was curious what she was thinking, so the girl feigned surprise over their matching wands. Smiling back, Edwin decided she liked wearing matching jewelry. After tea, he carried her back to the castle on his arms, walking along the garden path. Enjoying the view, the heroine wondered when she'd be able to walk on her own again. Suddenly, she spotted an unusual tower up ahead and wondered what it was. The Duke, who had been smiling moments ago, looked that way and suddenly turned serious, super unsettling. Caught off guard by his grim look, Angeline thought maybe she shouldn't have asked. Edwin hated repeating himself, so he hoped she'd listen carefully now. After hearing it was a terrifying place she wasn't allowed to enter, the heroine assumed it was a torture chamber. Once she gave her okay, the hero grinned and figured she deserved only the good stuff. Later, he headed back to his office, where the butler and Beryl were already waiting. Seeing the chrysanthemum wreath on the master's head, Set's jaw nearly hit the floor. Beaming with delight, Edwin couldn't wait to show off the amazing gift he got from his fiancée. The butler thought she was quite talented, while the hero savored the memory of how she'd made them with her tiny little hands. Time to get serious. The Duke was curious about that knight and servant warning. Beryl quickly clarified they'd taken the necessary steps to prevent issues. No need for the master to worry. Set decided to check. Was the lady really drawing a blank on everything? Unfortunately, that was the case, and nobody had a clue how to fix it. She looked 18, which meant she was just 3 during the jewelry hunt. But according to the Emperor, there were no survivors in Ambreth. The butler figured they might track down info on her through the sharks. The Duke doubted the plan's success. They hadn't shown their faces for 15 years because of the ravens. As for the Crown Prince's own soldiers, they were still combing the desert with the grave robbers. Beryl thought maybe they were searching for survivors, but Edwin knew for sure that if anyone had made it, they'd never go back there. Then the servant reminded them that the guardian tree was right in that desert. The sudden appearance of grave robbers was unexpected, and the hero discovered Prince Hugh is still investigating this case. Staring thoughtfully out the window, he couldn't figure out what the Crown Prince was up to. The next day, the heir to the throne headed to the parlor for a meeting with a distinguished guest. Duke Chavini bowed respectfully and mentioned how much he'd heard about the prince's growing popularity lately. He wondered how long the Crown Prince planned to keep stealing the hearts of every lady around. The heir realized he needed to start looking for a partner. After all, it was the destiny of a future emperor. Besides, it's a choice for the rest of his life, and he wanted to approach it carefully. After the meeting, Duke Chavini returned to his estate, where the butler greeted him with respect. The meeting with the heir wasn't exactly how he'd planned, but overall not bad. He stunned His Highness with a gift, a cutting-edge scientific timepiece. The Crown Prince was impressed by the luxurious design and intriguing functions of the device crafted by the Empire's greatest master. Suddenly, the heir noticed top-tier gemstones on the man's watch, clearly from the Peyton dukedom. It was reassuring that 2 of the Empire's dukes tightly controlled the continent's entire gemstone industry. Duke Chavini wasn't happy that His Highness mentioned the Eastern rulers, who also had a princess candidate in the running. The butler knew the Crown Prince had deliberately raised the topic. Duke Peyton owns the mine, and this might have had something to do with the heir's oracle. The oracle says His Highness can only be saved if he finds the gemstone keeper and wins her heart. Duke Chavini went nuts when he heard. His family's always been thought of as the gemstone keepers. He decided his daughter Lillian was going to be that crown princess and gave the order to move forward with the plan. A knock at the door and a young girl's voice calling to be let in. The man's eyes lit up when he saw his precious Lillian at the door. Settling beside her on the couch, he casually reminded her that the prince would soon choose his bride. She jumped up, bursting with excitement, and blurted, "Could it be me?" Duke Chavini had zero doubt she was the true gemstone keeper. Thinking her dad was the best in the whole world, she hugged him tight. Meanwhile, Edwin gave the order to officially announce his engagement to Angelina. Seth wasn't on board with the idea. He knew the crows would definitely tighten their watch. But the hero figured this made things even more interesting and was stoked at the thought of wrapping this up soon. The steward paused, then reminded him they had only a couple days left. Better get moving. Duke Shavini stared thoughtfully at his medallion. The opal inside cracked down the middle. Set figured he should clue the lady in on what's about to go down, but Edwin decided against giving her another scare. She hadn't even unlocked her powers yet. Angelina still flinched at everything, even though he treated her right. The hero just didn't get why she kept giving him the cold shoulder. He ordered the butler to keep her locked in her room that day and, if needed, shield her from danger. With a sly grin, he laid his hand on the black case. His bride-to-be needed to be ready for the spotlight. Later, when the Crown Prince found out Duke Crowford had made an engagement, he couldn't wrap his head around it. Had he kidnapped someone or strong-armed a family? As for the bride herself, all Dylan the butler managed to dig up was her name. Reading it in the report, the heir had never heard of the girl before. His butler cross-checked the noble list. No aristocrat with that name. That was a good thing. Everyone knew the emperor and the Crowfords were on the outs. If a noble agreed to this union, it'd be a direct shot across the royal family's bow. But even if his bride was just some commoner, why so sudden? When picking a girl in the middle of a royal feud, didn't it make more sense to go for someone with clout? Dylan figured maybe the Duke just wanted an heir. He clearly didn't care where his bride came from. Their family had been intermarrying for generations. No wonder most nobles stayed far away. The steward suddenly realized there might be a problem with the hero's body, and then it hit him like a lightning bolt. Ever since jewelry vanished, the Duke's madness had been growing worse by the day. Could he already be at his breaking point? This explains why the heir suddenly needed a successor so urgently. Still, a strange feeling gnawed at the Crown Prince, like they'd overlooked something crucial. According to the emperor, the Crowford curse runs in the family, meaning the heir would get it too. The Crown Prince ordered Dylan to keep digging into the case and report any key details immediately. When he learned the Duke of Shawini was already on the job, the heir was impressed and decided to meet his daughter soon. Later, alone in his chambers, he summoned his loyal Kasan. Suspecting something was off with Duke Crowford, he wanted the warrior to check on the hero and the bride's physical condition. Kasan rushed off to follow orders, and the prince vowed they'd leave no stone unturned. Crowford was a brutal monster. If they messed up even a little, he'd snap their necks in an instant. But this time, the heir was determined. Only he'd be the one standing at the end. The next morning, Angelina was fast asleep in her bed, lost in a dreamless slumber. When she woke up and didn't scream at the Duke's sudden arrival, she heard it was time to move out of the estate. Even though ravens were chasing her, Edwin insisted she'd be completely safe with him. She knew he'd protect her. But what if someone finds out she's Jevely? Won't that start trouble? With a cool smile, the hero decided no one would ever catch wind of this. She knew magical hair dye existed in this world, but it only lasted a few hours and left your hair looking like a rat's nest. Way too suspicious. Assuming the Duke meant her, Angelina couldn't wrap her head around it. Did he honestly think this would work? Later, she showed up at his office, and Edwin politely pulled her over to sit beside him on the couch. When she saw him grab a fancy bottle of liquid from his desk, she realized he was actually gonna go through with it. Staring at his smug face, she wasn't so sure this was safe anymore. At first, Edwin asked what color she liked, then shrugged and went with his own golden shade. The second the stuff hit her hair, it turned golden, full-on instant transformation. Far from a broom, she looked more like a shampoo commercial come to life. Grinning at the result, the Duke quickly clarified this effect didn't fade. Turns out the dye was a family secret. Her hair would stay that way until he decided to change it. Angelina was floored. She'd never heard the Crawfords had magic in their blood. In this world, there's no magic tower, and mages? Super rare, all working solo. Plus, Edwin wanted to gift his bride the family heirloom. You couldn't use it without the head of the family's okay. He pulled out a black case, opened it, and inside were contact lenses set with precious gems. Sliding them into the heroine's eyes, they gave her a whole new look along with her dyed hair. Suddenly, she wondered, could she even use these gadgets to make a break for it? Catching her thoughtful expression, the hero clarified that she couldn't use them on her own. Plus, he could switch it back any time, restoring her real eye and hair color. After wrapping up the formalities, he was ready to head for the exit with her. Later, riding in the carriage, Angelina decided to ask where exactly they were headed. Hearing that it was a place she'd like, she was really confused. Soon, they abruptly stopped at an iconic jewelry boutique. The Duke still remembered his fiancée wanted matching jewelry, so he'd brought her here. Everything should have been fine, except Angelina remembered this store belonged to the heroine's family from the novel. Edwin fell in love with her and kidnapped. Though the heroine was of the Jevely race, no way to know what would happen if they crossed paths. When they entered, a clerk at the entrance greeted them, addressing the hero as Sir Million. Angelina, walking beside him as usual, asked why he used the Seth surname. Edwin smiled and figured if he'd shown up openly, the staff wouldn't even be able to utter a word. Since he came with his fiancée this time, he decided to hide his identity so she could look around without pressure. Realizing the hero actually cared about her, she couldn't believe it was even possible. They quickly seated her at a table stacked with jewelry cases. The Duke wanted her to pick what she liked, but Angelina said she'd go with whatever he chose. Suddenly, amid all the sparkly jewelry, her eyes locked onto earrings with a unique orange gemstone. Turns out it was a fiery diamond, one of the rarest colored gems around. The color reminded her of marigolds, and she couldn't tear her gaze away. Edwin snatched the earring, held it to his fiancée's ear, and decided it suited her perfectly. He was buying them, praying she'd like his gift. She blushed a little and smiled, nodding, like there was no other option. The Duke swept her into his arms again, determined to buy her everything she might need. Then they hit the city streets for a stroll. Not long into it, Angelina cracked. People were staring from every direction. She just prayed he'd let her walk. The Duke didn't see the problem. She was safe in his grip. But Angelina wanted to walk her own land. In the end, Edwin gave in, gently setting her down, but unease gnawed at him as she stepped away. So they had to hold hands all the time. After a while, they found themselves on the city's central square. Angelina was awestruck by the beauty of the place, with a huge fountain and a fairy statue right in the middle. Turns out that statue was built by the first head of the Crawford family. The heroine knew people hated the Jevely, but she couldn't get why the emperor let them keep the fairy statue. Suddenly, Edwin got serious and vowed no one would dare touch the Crawford lands. Out of nowhere, one of the servants approached, needing to deliver something urgent to the master. To Angelina's surprise, the Duke stepped away briefly and left her alone. She grabbed his sleeve with hopeful eyes, but the hero still had to hear the servant out. Patting her head, he decided there was no need to worry. The knights could protect her. She ended up sitting on a bench by the fountain, still uneasy despite the soldiers nearby. Suddenly, a ball rolled to her feet, and kids nearby called out, wanting it back. Grabbing the ball and glancing at the knights, the heroine hoped it wasn't a big deal. She took it to the kids, but decided not to toss it, afraid it'd roll off somewhere. The boy snatched the toy from her hands and bolted, leaving her totally baffled. She spun around, accidentally brushing against a passing man, who immediately apologized. But as soon as he saw her face, the cloaked stranger's expression shifted, and he looked thrown off. The man couldn't figure out why he was reacting to this person like that. Backing away, Angelina somehow felt like he definitely recognized her, or realized she was Jevely. Edwin approached, hugged his fiancée, and didn't get why she couldn't stay put. The hero turned to the stranger, demanding to know who he was and what he wanted from his beloved. The man looked totally shocked, which only confused the heroine more and irked the Duke. After a few minutes, Edwin bought his fiancée cotton candy and sat her on a bench. Taking a bite of the sugary cloud on a stick, Angelina felt a lot calmer. She started wondering if the hero knew that weird cloaked guy. Hearing she thought he looked familiar, the Duke wanted to know, had they met before? But she couldn't remember anything, so couldn't say for sure. Edwin turned to Beryl, hoping they'd killed the guy, but sadly he'd escaped. The hero instantly ordered him to be captured alive and brought to him, making Angelina shiver. Smiling, he told her he'd find him soon. No need to worry. This night, the Crown Prince got word that Duke Crawford had stepped out in person with his fiancée. If he were in his shoes, he'd be hiding her. But Edwin? Looks like he was intentionally flashing his chosen one around. Kassan confirmed it all personally. Her hair was definitely golden, so she wasn't Jewel. But the prince was scratching his head. Why the heck did the Duke bring her along? Maybe he's just feeling lousy and wants an heir already. Crawfords are born with golden hair, and he showed up with a bride who's got the same. Once he found out the hero was in normal health, the Crown Prince gave the order to keep tailing him. As for his fiancée, no need to keep tabs on her. Still, some doubts lingered. The prince figured a face-to-face with her would be a good idea. Meanwhile, Edwin was back in his study with Seth and Beryl. The soldier kept tracking the crow's movements. Meanwhile, the Duke went to check in with the butler. Any news from the sharks? Seth quickly clarified, no sign of a child near the Muxa Desert 15 years ago. Edwin was seriously baffled. Where the heck had his fiancée been before they met? On the flip side, if the AULs don't know anything, the crows aren't a problem for now. The next day, the Duke personally placed a black opal necklace around Anglesh's neck. Wearing jewelry on your hands isn't always practical, so he made them into a pendant. The heroine had never seen a stone like this before, and turns out, black opal was the most expensive in its class. Plus, the necklace she bought earlier was way too heavy, and this one's lighter. You could even train in it. Right then, Angelina realized he was subtly pushing her to get moving. And hey, it mattered to her too, so she decided to give it her all. Edwin also wanted to hand her the rings they'd now be wearing together, and the heroine was shocked they were already done. Hearing the Duke had rushed the jewelers, she knew he probably threatened them. Grabbing the ring box, the hero was already dying to see what they came up with. Inside were custom-made jewelry pieces. Clearly someone worked their ass off on these. Edwin hoped they'd win his bride's heart, especially since they were matching. Even if it was a little late, he wanted to make it clear. He was 100% committed to the engagement. Once the rings were on, he was ready to let everyone know she was his now. Angelina could feel just how heavy the ring was on her finger. Maybe it was the point of no return now. She'd definitely never escape the Duke. So instead of running, she decided to fight back. She had to escape not just Edwin, but the imperial family too. Now, with a heartfelt smile, she was happy everyone would finally find out about her engagement to the hero. The Duke froze in shock, then fixed her with a serious look that left Angelina flustered. Next, he suddenly pulled her into a hug, unsure what to do with himself now that she was smiling so beautifully. It was the first time he'd ever felt this kind of excitement. It felt like his heart might explode, but at the same time, it was incredibly exhilarating. Angelina, meanwhile, was in stunned silence, clueless about what was going on. Later, Edwin clarified he'd be gone tomorrow. The imperial family had stirred up too much attention, and tomb raiders were already showing up. On top of that, he wanted her to stay in her room and not step outside tomorrow night. Angelina was thrown by his words. What was the big deal anyway? Turns out it was the night of the blood moon, when monsters actually come out. As promised, the next night she spotted it through the window, a massive, blood-red moon hanging in the sky. She remembered how at some point wild rumors had started spreading that monsters were linked to the Jevils. In the years that followed, suspicion of their race crawled across the empire, and the hatred just kept rising. Angelina didn't get why the hero had to vanish for this specific night. Pressing her face to the window, she realized no matter what, they weren't meeting today. Suddenly, she realized how empty and lonely her heart felt without him. The thought that she used to hate seeing him but now was upset about being apart left Angeline completely baffled. At that moment, her hand accidentally brushed against the black opal necklace hanging around her neck. The stone was also a gift from the Duke, and it had some weird, eerie charm to it. The heroine decided she needed to activate her powers as fast as possible. A sudden, deafening crash echoed from everywhere at once, making her spin around in shock. Acting on instinct, she leapt onto the bed and dove under the covers. Her chest began burning with pain, like a red-hot dagger had just been stabbed into it. She remembered they'd made a blood pact, so they could now sense if either of them was in danger. Assuming something had happened to Edwin, she rushed to grab a handful of gemstones and stuff them into a bag. Clutching it to her chest and ignoring the searing ache in her heart, she bolted for the door. When she ran outside, she immediately crashed into Seth, who'd been blocking her path to keep her safe. Angeline tried to explain the Duke was in trouble, but the butler said he was just testing the castle's defenses. She couldn't take the pain anymore and started screaming, convinced Edwin was in danger. She decided to clarify it was the blood pact making her feel this way. Seth had no real comeback and figured better to just shut up and listen. Stuart double-checked she could lead the way to his lordship and followed her. Bursting into the courtyard, the heroine suddenly realized Edwin was in that same tower she was forbidden to enter. Beryl ran into her, completely baffled how she'd appeared out of nowhere. When he heard she needed to see the Duke immediately, Beryl froze, shocked, speechless. Seth showed up fast and figured, hey, it's urgent, so let her through. Knowing there was no other choice and he'd have to reveal his lordship's terrifying secret, the soldier agreed to take her up the tower. Turns out the entrance was hidden, right in the middle of the wall. Climbing up and hearing weird noises, the heroine panicked. Maybe some monster was hiding in there? Still lost in thought, they reached the tower's top, a small empty room lit by a few torches. At the other end, Angelina spotted a man chained to the wall, bleeding out. Frozen in horror, she didn't know where Edwin was or why this place existed at all. The chained man suddenly screamed, thrashing against his chains, scaring her even more. Staring at him, she realized this crazy man was none other than Duke Crawford himself. She couldn't wrap her head around it, but Set quickly clarified it was a curse. The Crawford bloodline comes with raw power, but it's matched by their insanity. Every blood moon night, the condition gets worse. Nothing we can do about it. Angelina froze in shock, staring at the hero losing his mind. No clue how to help him. She'd just taken over Jewel's body by accident and honestly had no idea how to handle precious stones. Snapping out of it, she realized Edwin can't die now or she'd be stuck running forever. Plus, his desperate scream was pure begging for help. Remembering his promise to protect her, Angelina felt fear vanish. Confident all of a sudden. Edwin's always looked out for her. She can't just walk away now. She isn't Jewel, but whoever wears the body needs to learn how to use this power. With that thought and needing to help Edwin, she grabbed the pouch of gems and sprinted toward him. The stones ripped out of the bag, scattering everywhere. Power wrapped around Angelina instantly. Feels like touching the guardian tree, but stronger, like it's second nature. Something primal, like she's exactly what Edwin needs. The Duke started snarling, servants going full panic mode for their lady. She closed in, and all of a sudden, Edwin lunged like a feral beast. He jolted back to reality a second later, staring straight at his bride. Angelina stroked his cheek and vowed she'd help him, no doubt about it. He softly said her name, and all at once the pain just slipped away from his body. Being around him didn't always terrify the hero. It made him want to bolt, sure, but not always. But seeing the fear in Edwin's eyes, she realized she couldn't walk away now. The next second, she collapsed, slumping to the floor and sending everyone into confusion. The Duke caught her in his arms and hit his knees instantly. He shifted his gaze to her bare feet, bloodied blisters from racing through the castle. Edwin realized again, his bride was weak, couldn't handle the pain. Seth and Beryl were baffled, hoping the master was all right. Truth was, the hero felt better than he'd ever felt. Crawfords are born with it, their veins pulse, blood boils. Even with Jewel's black opal, you can't live easy. It just eases the symptoms. But the physical pain, the urge to kill, never fully gone. Later, staring at the sleeping heroine, Edwin labeled her a scaredy rabbit. He grabbed a lock of her hair, kissed it, and wished she'd wake up already. The next morning, she jolted up from bed, remembering she saw the Duke's outline through her sleep. Edwin shoved her back under the covers, confused why she was already scrambling to get up so soon after waking up. Angelina immediately grabbed his head, hoping he wasn't hurt anywhere and felt okay. The hero smiled in response, wanting to know, had she really been that worried about him? She didn't get what was so surprising. He'd looked awful. Squeezing her tight, the Duke decided everything was fine now, and he felt great. Plus, he finally understood what it meant to have someone care about you. Deciding to be that way too, he asked how his bride's leg felt. Learning she'd even forgotten she was hurt, he couldn't get why she didn't take better care of herself. His hands still smelled like medicine, and realizing he'd treated her legs himself, she got even more confused. But Edwin just couldn't let anyone else touch his bride. Remembering he was a psychopathic killer, Angelina wondered if people really do change on the edge of death. At the same time, the hero checked how she felt, remembering she'd fainted yesterday. She thought she was totally fine, until she noticed her hair color had changed. Turns out the Duke changed him, thinking it would look better. If we cancel the effect completely, she'll look like a Julie and won't be able to run off. But the heroine wasn't about to run anyway. He was in danger. When she heard that if he died, her hair color would go back to normal, she realized she'd be doomed if she didn't help him out. Still, the Duke didn't want his bride to see him like this. Angelina was honestly hoping he'd tell her why he was hurting so bad yesterday. The hero remembered, long ago, different races coexisted. To protect the weakest, God separated humans from the rest and banned contact. But one dragon defied the order, slipped into the human world, and fell for a human woman. The angry god cursed their kids and all descendants with dragon blood, eternal madness and short lives. The dragon offered his life for a cure. After some back and forth, God sent the Julie race to his descendants to ease the curse. That's how this symbiosis started. Julie help Crowfords, Crowfords give them protection. So every family head has to visit Ambrian at least once to renew the oath and get an opal. Edwin got his from the last duke, but it was now half cracked. Turns out he snapped when he saw his dad die. The good news? Even in that state, he didn't lose his effect. The hero hoped he could hold on a little longer. That was weird because Edwin was fine until the heir prince killed him. But if Opal had been helping all along, what even changed? Angelina remembered nobody just handed him everything on a silver platter in the novel. She figured it was probably her fault. Remembering the prophecy, Jevally was supposed to bring the red moon and burn the continent down, but suddenly she heard the Duke thanking her. He figured he'd be dead meat last night if she wasn't there. Grateful doesn't even cover it. But she looked super surprised, which bugged him. She was just shocked that Edwin Crownford was thanking her, and maybe it actually hurt him to even get to this point. She was going to stick around to help, decided the hero wasn't going to suffer anymore. The second she said that, the Duke yanked her back into his arms. Suddenly, he wondered, had Angelina actually forgotten nothing? Hearing he meant the stones she'd learned to use, the heroine suddenly got it. After doing her homework, she could now grant him any wish, except escape or divorce. Locking eyes with him, she wanted a promise she wouldn't die. Edwin was stunned. Sure, he'd been busy protecting her, but apparently this wasn't about crows. She meant the Duke himself. That just made him more confused. She knew deep down she feared his people-killing hobby, but went softer on the wording. She remembered his words about treating her like his own future wife. If she messed up, he could end up in danger, so he had to make sure she stayed safe. Now they were bound by the same fate, and if he wanted a long, happy life, he'd have to make that promise. The hero was swayed by her talk of fate, and when he made the vow, Angelina lost it with excitement. But she still wanted a contract, and Edwin was confused. Did his future wife not trust him that much? She couldn't wrap her head around trusting someone who'd draw his sword over a mistake. So the Duke asked if there'd ever been a time he broke a promise. To his shock, the answer was never. But to keep her calm, he signed the contract. That night, Duke Peyton got a report from Verona. The heir had invited Lady Chavini for tea. Knowing the prince was sniffing out potential in-laws, his lordship found it all exhausting. Maybe it was that oracle's words about him needing to find a gemstone master. Because of that, two women stood out for the crown princess role, Lady Chavini and Evelyn Peyton. Their families ran jewelry empires, competing and teaming up, representing the southern and eastern territories. The Duke didn't want his daughter in the imperial family. He wanted her to run the business. But how to do it without pissing off the heir? Right then, another servant burst in, ready to drop a horrifying bombshell. Lady Peyton felt awful and needed a doctor immediately. A bit later, the doctor checked the girl and figured it was probably a fever. The Duke was baffled. His daughter had never even had a sniffle, but the doc still couldn't pin down what was wrong. Still, fevers were common stuff, so no big deal. Later, he heard her condition was getting better and bolted to her room. Evelyn was back on her feet and greeted her panicked dad with a smile. She felt bad for making him stressed, but all that mattered to his lordship was that she was better. Just then, the maid yanked the curtains open, sunlight blasted in, and Evelyn suddenly winced, clutching her eyes. The Duke was stunned while she howled in agony from the blinding light. They yanked the curtains closed, but she couldn't even peek her eyes open. Later, the doctor came back and figured it might be the fever's after effects. The Duke didn't care so much about the diagnosis as finding a cure for his daughter. The doc had to break it to him. Her eyesight could get better, but a full fix? Near impossible. When they heard that, both the Duke and Evelyn froze. Why? When? None of it made sense. Evelyn asked if she'd still be able to gaze at precious gems. She hit rock bottom when she heard she had to stay away from bright stuff. Knowing how serious things were, the Duke told the doctor to knock himself out trying to fix it with everything he's got. Later, Evelyn figured she'd be the family joke if anyone learned the future head of the house couldn't even glance at jewelry without a meltdown. Her dad reasoned she didn't have to be a perfectionist and that there were solid people around to handle things. Plus, she hadn't touched a meal in days, so the Duke wanted her to start eating before she vanished into a skeleton. A little later, she asked her dad straight up if the oracle's doom was finally coming true. That night, the Duke double-checked with Ferran if he remembered which oracle Evelyn had. According to the old reading, if they couldn't find the real master of the mana source, all was lost. Just then, the doctor showed up unannounced, and the Duke waved him in. The doc looked grim and suddenly decided she'd need a full workup to figure out what was wrong. The Duke was baffled. Wasn't this just regular flu stuff? The doctor quickly clarified that the fever and headaches were totally normal symptoms, but during a second check, he spotted green splotches on her skin, something he'd never seen before. The Duke hoped that once they knew what they were dealing with, they could fix it fast. When the doctor admitted he couldn't promise a thing, the Duke let out a defeated sigh and told him to get out. No sooner had a few minutes passed than a servant burst in with urgent news. As soon as His Grace heard the Elia mine had just collapsed, he nearly had a heart attack. Later, Edwin got an invitation to the Imperial family's ball and ordered it burned. Seth knew they had some big announcement coming. Every family head needed to be there, but the hero decided to blow it off. As the butler burned the invitation, he remembered rumors that Lady Peyton was having vision issues from the fever's after effects. When Edwin also learned the collapse had happened at Duke Patern's Elia mine, he called it a suspicious coincidence. It could just be a coincidence, but someone's probably making their move. Seth wanted to dig deeper, but the hero figured it wasn't worth it, and already had a good idea who was behind it. The guy wants to cozy up to the Imperial family while taking down a powerful noble bloodline. Deciding to keep going through his mail, the Duke saw he'd been sent an invitation to the garden fair. He waved it off. Why keep inviting him there over and over? The butler was about to toss it in the fire too, but Edwin suddenly snatched the letter from his hand. After a second's thought, a brilliant idea hit him. Meanwhile, the heroine was testing stones, blown away by the black opal's strange properties. Normally, gems stop absorbing energy once activated, but the opal just kept going. There was a mark on it that none of the other stones had after activation. Some of the gemstones were hard to even recognize, and Angeline figured it was because she was a lousy jewel. She jerked up from her seat and yelled, deciding she might not have all the abilities, but they weren't missing either. At that moment, the Duke leaned in, wanting to know what had his bride so worked up. She screamed like she used to when he popped up out of nowhere, scared out of her wits by the shock. The hero had no clue what she was scared of. He'd already promised not to kill her. But all she really wanted was for him to knock before entering next time. Figure she's jumpy, he decided to yell before walking in, just in case. After that, he found out she'd almost finished inspecting the gemstones he'd brought over. Angeline hoped they'd all stay with her, but the Duke suddenly decided he could take a few. The catch? She couldn't suppress all these stones at once, no matter what. A few seconds later, she made her choice. Then Edwin took the rest. At that moment, the heroine thought she should have just grabbed the most expensive ones and not overthink it. The hero suddenly asked if she liked flowers. Got a yes, so he pulled out an invitation to the Ruburn Garden Fair. Hearing his words and seeing the invite, Angeline felt a jolt run through her entire body. The garden fair was the place where all the story's characters' fates would collide. She played dumb, and the Duke had to clarify it was some kind of flower festival. Edwin was really hoping his fiancée would agree to tag along to the fair. The heroine was scared to go to the capital where the Imperial family was, but it was a golden chance to grab that Saphiro sword. She needed to go to this fair if she wanted a normal life with the Duke. Edwin saw her zoning out, pulled her in tight, and figured she just needed to spit out her answer. After a beat, she quietly said she wanted to go with him. She couldn't believe someone who loathed the Imperial family was putting her opinion first. In moments like this, Angelina wanted nothing more than to be selfish, but she still couldn't ditch him. So she made up her mind to go to the garden fair with Duke Crawford. She also hoped Edwin would catch on that this was a chance to run into the Imperial family. Truth was, they really got on the hero's nerves. Those constant Raven attacks were already more than enough. But his fiancée wanted to be there, so they hit the road without questions. The girl blushed and genuinely thanked the Duke. The hero gave her a thoughtful smile, wondering if that was all. Not understanding what a guy who fell out of the sky with nothing but empty hands could possibly offer, she figured she better ask what he meant. With the same smirk, Edwin winked and ran his fingers along his cheek. Now the heroine wished she'd never tried to get it in the first place. But the Duke had made such a big decision for her, so she kissed his cheek with total honesty. The hero looked totally flustered after that, like the whole thing was super weird. Wait, what were they talking about? He suddenly had to confirm, what the hell was his bride even made of? Her touch made him feel full, even though he hadn't eaten a bite. Worse, his head was dizzy and his heart was chopping out of his chest. Next thing, he leaned in real close to her face, just a breath away from a kiss. Watching him slowly close the gap, Angelina blinked shut, telling herself she wasn't ready for this yet. And just when things got serious, they heard a servant yell that the shark captain was back. The Duke barked for him to wait in the study, while the heroine slowly shook off the shock. Later, she slumped into a garden chair with a tea and some pastries to steady her nerves. The Empire's capital was about to blow up with drama, so they had to get ready. Plus, the Peyton family'd surely be there too. Evelyn's dealing with fever symptoms, but this isn't just a regular sickness. Something way worse is going on. Akaida's way more dangerous than a cold. It's a serious illness from the toxic Akra plant. Evelyn's sickness wasn't random, someone orchestrated it. By the story's end, Duke Peyton tracks down the guy who stole his daughter's dream. Angelina wasn't about to jump into this fight. Survival was her top priority. But they needed to cure Evelyn to get the Seifer blade hidden in their estate. Now they had to figure out how to heal Evelyn without exposing her hidden power. She lifted her gaze to the scorching sunset. A brilliant idea hit Angelina, and she was already moving to make it happen. First order of business, Jenny was told to get her to Seth's room, right now. Meanwhile, Huey grabbed his lordship's head, determined to stand by and protect him. But he knew things were under control. Edwin just didn't get why there was any cause for alarm. Plus, with the heroine on his side, there was no reason to stress. On one hand, Huey was genuinely glad the girl was with the Duke now. On the other, they had no clue where she'd even come from. The warrior dug into this case across other countries, but still came up empty. After that, he started tracking down info on grave robbers. Rumors swirl that the Muhas Desert, where Ambria lies, is hiding ancient treasures too. There are all sorts of theories, but the most likely one points to precious gems. Edwin thought it was pretty basic, but Huey quickly clarified, of course the stones are anything but ordinary. Legend says there's a mysterious gem that feels like a living flower when you touch it. Some even say in the ancient kingdom of Eucales, they considered it sacred. When the Duke heard the soldier's conclusion that the imperial family might be after this gem, he decided to find out where that came from. Turns out, there were all sorts of theories and wild speculation, fading in and out. But no sooner did they die down than someone stirred them up again. As soon as the desert rumors started spreading, the crows began stirring up trouble. Edwin was sure all this was somehow tied to Jewel. They wiped out the entire Crowford race and now they're searching for their hidden treasures. But why? If this theory's right, the genocide wasn't just about getting rid of the Crowfords. The Duke ordered Huey to dig up everything he could on that mysterious gem. Meanwhile, the palace steward showed up unannounced with a report. Seth decided to tell the truth. Like, a few minutes ago, the lady asked him for a favor. Edwin went dead silent when he heard she wanted to make him a gift. Beaming with joy, he had no clue why out of nowhere, but Huey said gifts just needed no reason. The butler added that the lady wanted to surprise his lordship. The hero gave Seth a curious look, wondering what kind of gift this was. The butler then handed him a rolled-up parchment with the gift's design. No matter which way you looked at it, the shapes all looked like regular glasses.